introduction, so I can skip one of my slides in a few minutes. So
Awesome.
let me see if I can share my screen.
Cool.
It should all work. Right? Is there visual?
I see it. Looks good.
Great. Okay, then I'll do it full screen. So basically, last year at Selenium Conf in London, I gave a talk around the same topic. So how to check your tests without running them. So one of the ways to do it is to execute linting on your code, right? But this time I'm back with a new ESLint plugin, and that's what I'm going to focus on in this session. So first, let's get out some basics around linting, and then I'll dive into demoing the ESLint plugin. So this is what Joe already covered. Basically, I've been around in software testing for a long time. I go to different organizations to help out with test and test automation strategies. And I'm based in the Netherlands. Here's some contact information about me, so don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. Even 10 minutes before going live on this test guild meetup, someone raised an issue on GitHub, so I quickly fixed it. So yeah, I love open source, so keep the feedback coming.
Cool.
So we're talking about linting, right? So what's linting? People also know it as static code analysis. It's the process of running a program that will analyze your code for potential errors. So basically, not running your code, but checking your code whether it can work, or maybe the code convention you want to follow is a bit off, and this is what a linting tool can do. Wikipedia has also a nice description. Lint or linter is a tool that analyzes source code to flag programming errors, etc. And the term linting is actually derived from removing bits and fluffs of undesired piece of wool from sheep's wool. Don't ask me why it was derived from that, but that's what I found. That was the origin of the term, and well, apparently we've been using the term ever since. So why do we lint? Like I said, so standardization code conventions, like if you follow like tech people on Twitter, you must have seen discussions about like, oh, do you like or dislike semicolons at the end of the line if you're talking about JavaScript, or the opening curly bracket on the new line or not. It can improve maintainability and readability because you can expect we all follow the same standards. So in code review, you're not distracted by all these other things like, oh, why is this all off, or why is this indentation even really bad, or not what I'm used to. So it can get rid of all those distractions, and more importantly, it can also find really syntax errors or bugs, like code that will never work, that will never execute, or will never compile. So that's a really powerful feature of a linting tool. So this is all without executing code. So if you look at this graph, it's a very popular graph to predict the cost against the development phases. So if you find a bug in production, the costs are much higher to fix it, opposed to when you're writing the code and you can fix it right away, right? So with the linting tool, with the rapid feedback you have there, you can fix it right away. So, and that's usually goes for all these application codes. So what does it mean for test code? Yeah, in this session, like I said, I will focus on the ESLint plugin that are created for the UI testing frameworks or UI testing tools. So we're talking about less flaky test code, like better locators, no hard weights or other better weights you could use. It can give you advice on that, and following conventions, right? So in our industry, in the test automation industry, there are a lot of good practices we like to follow, and yeah, sometimes you forget one, or there are different ones, so you can decide for your organization which one works for you, so you can really follow the conventions you would like to follow as an organization. And one of the most important things about linting is, for me personally, is really the collaboration with developers, or collaboration between developers, because we're really talking about the same language. So if you have already linting tools for your application, you can apply it also for your test code. So if a developer helps out with the test code, it's not distracted with a completely different code convention, indentations, curly brackets, like I said before. So we can focus on the problem or the things you want to improve. And today, CI/CD requires rapid feedback, and well, with linting you have light feedback in your code editor, so that's the fastest feedback you can get when you are coding. So if you project the same graph as in the cost against the phases, development phases, well, here we're talking about tests. So usually we're talking about like production, or it's more running your test code, right? Running your tests, usually in the pipeline nowadays. So if you want to fix it there, it's sometimes quite hard, because you want to have the same environment, maybe spin up another similar environment, debug it, or even remote connect to that remote environment to see what's happening. Well, those costs are much higher to fix a bug if it's really in your test code, like a flaky test, than when you are writing the test. So how does it all work? So basically, you have the source code, and the linter, it will break down the source code into an abstract syntax tree, as they call it. And then the rule set is validated against it, like code conventions, indentations, but also like hard weights, or a test should contain an assertion, stuff like that. So a rule set, it will validate it against it, and then you get the feedback right away. And here I have a nice website, the astexplore.net. I'll show you an example on how it all works. So if you go to astexplore.net, there's a nice tool, completely interactive, which I use to build this plugin. So basically, if you click here, ESLint, then you can start writing and testing a custom rule. So for example, so here I already prepared a very simple rule. So let's say if I have test guilds.launch, right? And let's say we don't allow that, right? Let's have a really rule that doesn't allow to launch this test guild.
Cool. Can you make the screen bigger? Because I know people are going to ask about the text.
Let me see. Is that better?
Much better. Thank you so much.
All right. So let's say we have this test guild.launch, right? And we don't want that in our code. Like, let's not have anyone write this. So as you can see here, let me close down here. So here is the abstract syntax tree. So if I click on test guild, you see here it's a call expression with the callee, which is a member expression, and then the object, we just name test guild right here, and then the launch is property name of that call expression with the name launch. At first, I found it, how does this all work? But it's pretty neat that it's actually broken down in a tree, so you can actually do kind of like searches on it, right? So if I go back here, so I prepared this little piece of code. So let's say if this object name, so this is a call expression, right? So it's a call expression. So let me click here again to highlight this. So you have a call expression here, and so you have a callee object name, right? So you can use regex here or a complete match. So let's say if I say it's the skill, well, it says Learned rule still not fired because here I have a property name. So if I put then the launch, then it says okay, error, right? And you can say okay. Do this. So it actually also printed this error message, which also, if you write a custom ESLint rule, it will use this message to pop up in your code editor. So so this is yeah, quick overview on how this also all works within AST. So source code, this is the AST. And then based on that, you can start writing code or selectors to check on this. So let's go back to the presentation. So how does it fit in your workflow? So like I said, live feedback while coding in your code editor. So I will demo that. But you can also run it from the command line and also part of your build process. So in your CI/CD pipelines, what I usually do is having a lint stage in your pipeline or a lint step in your pipeline to check whether all the linting is okay. You can also have a Git, like a Husky hook if you're using a Node.js project. Where before pushing, for example, it will lint your code and then see if there are any errors before pushing it. So the demo, so I created this ESLint plugin UI testing. I actually started with WebdriverIO, which is based on the on Selenium. And then I started to realize, like, okay, many of these rules also are applicable for all the other popular JavaScript frameworks, right? Like Cypress, Playwright, Puppeteer, TestCafe. So I started to include them, and then when I was working on it, I realized, okay, I can make this a bit more flexible to support multiple automation tools. So here, so here's the README from the plugin, and I'll show you some rules hands-on. So here are rules that are currently included in the plugin, and I'll go through each of them. So here, maybe I also have to make this bigger. I'm not sure. Is this readable?
Not really, no.
Okay. Then if someone can help me out here. How do I zoom in here?
Let me Google this. Should be view appearances, and that should be a zoom option.
Yeah, and okay. Why is not working? Oh, zoom in.
Oh. There you go.
Keep doing it. Is this readable?
Can you do it one more time?
One more time. There we go.
Much better, right? Yep.
Apparently the shortcut didn't work, but I had to select it from the menu. Sorry about that. So what you do to use this plugin is to npm install the ESLint plugin UI testing, which I already did here. So it will appear in your package JSON. Basically, I'm using here a boilerplate project from Jeremy, and I just upgraded to WebdriverIO 6, and I installed ESLint to show you the demo. So here, if you so install ESLint and then ESLint init, then you get this basic configuration file. It will generate it. So if you then add this is all in the README. So if we add the plugin UI testing, and then here this is the plugin UI testing WebdriverIO, right? So here, now it's activated. So here you see avoid absolute URL, use a base URL in the project config. So this is one of the rules from the list. So let's go back here. So no absolute URL. And this is supported for Cypress and WebdriverIO because Playwright and Puppeteer more automation tools, they don't really come with a base config or anything like that. And TestCafe also does not have like a generic base URL thing. That's why it's only applicable for Cypress and WebdriverIO. The recommended rules, as you see here, are applicable for all the automation tools that are supported. So this is the no absolute URL. So if you looking at a missing assertion in test. So here you have an expect, right? So if I remove this, then it will say, hey, we miss an assertion in test. And even recently, I've seen tests that are running actually in pipelines and everything that doesn't have a single assertion. For example, I've seen UI tested end with a .click. But doesn't validate anything. So it's really important to have an assertion in your test. I also want to show you how you can also configure. So for each rule, there documentation about what is the correct code for this rule and incorrect, but also some options here. So if I use this in my rules. Here. So let's go back.
Kwo, I apologize. Is there a way you could try to increase it one more time? People are still saying that it's hard to read. I just want to make sure that they're able to get the essence of it. So make it as big as possible.
I'll do it like this, then I can still see my files.
Okay, perfect.
Let me know if it's still too small. So yeah, for people who have missed the code, so I added the UI testing WebdriverIO line here, and the UI testing to activate the plugin. So now I wanted to customize the missing assertion rule. So again, so if I comment that one out, it says missing assertion in test, right? Because it's by default checks the expect and assert method, but I can customize that. So that's why I was switching to the documentation here, because it says this is an example. So I just copy paste it in here. So basically, the missing assertion test rule says this, the assert commands to check is expect. So let's say assert test guild is my assertion library, right? So now here I still have the expect, but it says missing assertion test because I've configured it to use the assert test guild. Then the error goes away. Of course, I have a different linting issue here because it cannot find this this function. So let's go back here. So we already covered the first two. So no assertion hooks is basically the same as the missing assertion. So if you have a before each, right? So So if you before each, and if I have if this line here, so if I have but then it's the custom assert command is per rule. So now it checks the expect default method. Hopefully, yeah. It says avoid using assertion hooks, because an assertion is really part of a test, not so much part of a hook or any other kind of thing. So browser commands in test. So here you already see where I covered the avoid absolute URL, but also here you see avoid browser page commands in test. So rather move them to another abstraction layer, and the page object model is very popular to do it, for it to do it. Because you want your test to be really clean and to be, when you read it, to see what it's actually doing and what's the goal of the test. The no CSS page layout selector. So it's supported for all these automation tools. So if I have so this is WebDriver, right? So I have Selector, and I have ABC, DF, set, and it'll say avoid CSS locator type to page layout. So basically, it'll check whether it has 2 or more spaces or the graded and sign, because then it assumes that it's tied to a page layout. So if I remove this, so this is perfectly fine. However, the most recommended way for selectors is to have custom test attributes in your application. But I understand it's not always possible. So here it checks the basic rule, like, okay, you don't want to have like for example, a very long CSS selector that follows the whole tree of your application, because if something changes in your tree, the test will fail. The selector will fail. No disabled and no focus test. This is actually like it only. This is used, so avoid focus test. This is used a lot if you have like multiple tests here, and you say, okay, it only, and this is done. Well, I use it for writing your test or fixing a test. But if you forget that you put this on here, and you run it on the pipeline, then your whole test suite will run. You think, okay, all these tests are running, but actually only one test is running, right? Because you check this in. So this linting rule is to help you avoiding that, and also if you skip one, avoid disabled test. No hard waits. No hard waits. Actually, let's go back here. So if you have like a browser pause, right? This is a hard wait. So really avoid having that. It's up here. Avoid hard wait, because that can make your tests brittle. Because then you're relying on time and not relying on something to disappear or something to be displayed, something like that.
Quote, did I give it a suggestion of what you could try? Can you go back to that message?
This message?
Yeah, the browser one. When it does flag it, does it give you options of what would be better?
So it actually, if you click here, it will go to for example, is this one, if you're talking about selectors. So you have, it will link back to this GitHub documentation page with some suggestions. It's not that smart that it will analyze your code and just gives you like the perfect selector for you. That will be awesome, actually.
Not yet.
I've seen some crazy AI tools on Twitter lately. That's maybe it's coming, or if someone is building it, please let me know.
Well, it's open source. They can add it. They can add it to your project, hopefully.
Oh yeah. Do pull request. Oh. OpenOps accepted. I'll skip the implicit wait. This is just the timeout here. If you put the implicit for WebdriverIO specifically, and then you have some other things. So no link text, tag name. Expect page selector is the same as the CSS selector one. So here, if I do some crazy button, so it's also, so first it says, okay, try to use CSS selector because it's well, more recommended in the industry, and the XPath selector is tied to page layout, also checking the / here. So if I remove this, then it's only saying, okay, just use the CSS selector. Let's here. So this is just checking the selectors because we really like CSS selectors. You can do almost everything with CSS selectors. But like I said about the selectors, really try to use custom test attributes in your application, so you have really robust tests. No weights in test. So this is basically, so you have these examples for different automation tools. So here, for example, if I have this wait for display, so really move this into a other abstraction layer. So if you're using page objects, really move these kind of things like waiting for something inside of those methods, because it really says something about how that should work instead of how your test should work. So really keep your test as lean as possible. So I also have a Cypress example here, just to show you that it's also working with Cypress. I'm not doing all the automation tools here. I'm just showing Cypress as well. So for example, so I enabled here the plugin UI testing Cypress, and again, activated the plugin. So here you see the same thing, avoid absolute URL, moved user-based URL in the project config. Again, all these rules are configurable, also whether they are a warning or an error. So you see the default error or the log level here, but you can override that if you want to change that. So I think it's, yeah, here. So default is 1. If you want something like, oh, I want it to have an error, or the other way around, you can customize it in this way. I want to show you another cool thing, not related to my plugin, but if you're using ESLint, you have this no restricted syntax, right? So let's look that one up. ESLint. So this rule actually allows you to use a custom rule without installing anything. Well, you have ESLint obviously, but without having to install any additional plugin. So for example, here I created a, so you have this selected thing again, which I've shown you a bit earlier in the ASTExplorer.net. So here I created, oh, I have a collie name TestCafe, and if it's not equal to 2 arguments, then I would say this, disallow this, right? Like Joe does not like this, right? So if I go back here and I say TestCafe A B, then it's all fine. Just saying, okay, that is not defined. But if I change it to another, then it says Joe does not like this, right? So this is really powerful of ESLint to use that non-restricted syntax. For example, if you're in your team or organization or in your application, you want to have some code conventions in code. This is the way to do it without any trouble of creating a plugin, installing it, or any like that. You can do it right away. You can set the messages, and it will work like you see right away.
This is awesome, Kwo. I used to work for a large company, and I had 8 to 10 sprint teams, and I was on everyone's code review. And if I had this, you know how many times it would save me from all that, just the same issue over and over again. This is really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is very cool. I think in my experience also one of the challenges in talking to developers or testers, like, okay, what code convention should we follow, or we have this customized thing. How do we? So making decisions about that, I think that's usually the hardest part of it. Putting it in the code, yeah, this is really helpful.
Yeah, we had a checklist, so when they checked it in, they had to check it off, say, yes, we did this, this, and this, but this is way better, 100 times better.
Did they have to put a signature on paper?
Well, it's all digital, so we knew that they, that they said they did it, so it was good.
Digital signatures, maybe.
That's right.
So this is, this is all I wanted to show you in a live demo. I have some key takeaways. Enable linter for code conventions, and really here, as you can see here, the use of custom linting rules for your team organization code conventions, right? Because it can really help you out and save you time, discussions, and save you time in the code review. So next to code conventions, also linter can really help in detecting potential flaws of the code that may not work or may not compile, and try to use the same application linting rules you already have to apply it to your test code. Maybe there are some exceptions there, but you can, with ESLint, exclude or change any rule you want per project or per piece of code. And like I said, the most important thing for me, my experience with this, is that it really improves the collaboration with developers. You're talking the same language, literally, because you're following the same standards, the same code conventions, and you really can focus on what you're trying to achieve together. Yeah, and that's it. So just give me some contact info.
Awesome.
Time for Q&A.
Yeah, cool. Can you put your camera on full screen? Just stop sharing and it should go back to full.
Yeah. Let me see where my mouse is. Yep.
All right, let me get rid of my head here. All right, cool. All right, so cool. Great demo. I really love this. I know I talked to you a while back on a podcast, a Test Guild podcast, and you showed the Sonar WebDriver plugin. Is this different than that, right, or is this just more of the guts of what you actually use within the Sonar plugin?
Yeah, so I completely forgot to mention that. So yes, the Sonar WebDriver plugin is actually also a set of linting rules, also based on WebDriver, but then for the Java code. But if you look at the rules, it's not as extensive and not as flexible as what I could do with ESLint. So it's a bit more limited. But if you're using Java, really check that one out. You could also have some more refinement. And here, this ESLint plugin really focuses on all the JavaScript automation tools, because here, especially here in the Netherlands, and also some other countries, the JavaScript frameworks are getting so much traction in the industry, much more than the Java-based ones.
Very cool. So this may be on me. A lot of people, there's some confusion. I list almost every other tool except Selenium. So does this ESLint support Selenium?
So here I support, so the plugin supports WebdriverIO, which is based on Selenium. I think as far as I could see, it's the most popular framework based on Selenium. If you're using the WebdriverJS out of the box, so vanilla, so this does not support it because all the rules are very different. But yeah, if it's needed for some people, maybe we can add that as well. I set it up as in we can extend it quite easily.
So how easy can it be extended? Say someone's like, this is awesome, but I know Kwo's busy. How can I contribute? How does someone work to help keep this alive and help you out?
Yeah, actually, well, thanks for sharing and all of this. I think it's also got some traction because I have people open some issues, find some bugs, and I try them to fix them as soon as possible. But like I said, this is open source, and this is really our tool, right? It's not only mine; it's really of the community, and I think we as a community can come up with more sophisticated linting rules than the ones I already created in this plugin. So yeah, you're welcome to create a pull request or just send me a message and I can help you get started. But the astexplorer.net, if you're able to create a simple linting rule with that, that piece of code you write there is actually the linting rule itself. So if you already achieved that, then it's really easy to move into a plugin.
Great. So the folks that are just joining or may have missed my intro, I just want to remind you to ask Kwo a question. All you need to do is go to this questions tab, ask your question. There's a 30-second delay, so make sure to get your questions in time so I have enough time to ask Kwo your questions. So Kwo, first question's from Dwayne, and Dwayne wants to know, would I need to create my own rules for Protractor, or would I be able to use the WebdriverIO rules?
Yeah. So like I said, I started with WebdriverIO, and then I was thinking about these rules, and I thought, oh yeah, if I extend a bit more, maybe it could also work for Protractor. But then, so when I was working on all these rules, like okay, Protractor, the API is a bit different, so it needs a bit more work to get it supported. But there's also someone else created this Protractor ESLint plugin, which has not only like the selectors and everything, but also more very specific linting rules on the Angular part, right? All your ng model selectors and stuff like that. I think that one's way more extensive than this plugin, but it's really specific for Protractor because it really focuses on all the Angular stuff. So I suggest to check that one out. But maybe, yeah, you could also edit to have some rules from this plugin to support the project.
Great. And I thought Protractor is kind of a dead project. I don't see it being updated. It's kind of side thing, Kwo. I don't know. You work with a lot of different companies, or any thoughts on that?
Yes, that was also one of the reasons why I didn't put so much effort to get it supported as well, because I see that it's used less and less, and also, I don't think it got a major update like in the last 2 years or something. So it's not heavily maintained. So I also seen a lot of people moving from Protractor to WebdriverIO or to a other automation tool.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone that uses WebdriverIO seems to love it. So it seems to be the thing to use if you're using JavaScript right now. All right, next question's from Jamie. Jamie wants to know, When I use Visual Studio in Cypress, it seems to flag these types of scenarios without using lint. Wondering exactly how lint is different than out of the box type Visual Studio safe checks and standard Cypress checks.
I'm not sure if I got the question correct properly. So you're saying the out of the box linting rules from Visual Studio?
Yeah, it seems like there's a built-in rules, I guess, with we call it, I guess, source safe checks, individual source safe checks. So I don't know. I haven't used that particular thing, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this one. If there's another tool that really checks the UI testing part, so we're talking about better locator checks, weights, missing assertions in tests, so really to improve your test code. And stuff like, okay, don't use a absolute URL. Yeah, really let me know, because I couldn't find a different tool that does this specifically, other than I've seen other linting tools like for Jasmine or for Jest that does checks things like, okay, no focused or disabled test. But this plugin really focused on the UI testing part. So yeah, I'm not familiar with the one that was mentioned.
Cool. Another question is from Samantha. She says the dev team I work with uses Prettier.js, which wreaks absolute havoc on the readability of my TestCafe tests, largely because of the chaining and the standard syntax of the tests. They want me to just deal with it so that the files are linted the same, but I feel strongly that the readability is important. Do you have any suggestions on how to make linters for UI tests to play nicely with Prettier.js?
So if I understand correctly, the so if strict linting rules on the application, and that's applied to the test code as well, and that is maybe not something that you want from the start. Yeah, if that's the case, like is it all the linting rules? It's all customizable. So I've seen a lot of times, and I've done it myself, that you have a different set for your test code, right? Because a lot of these application code linting rules are really good to apply to test code as well. But also there are some of them that you might not want to activate or not want to activate it right now because you're still modeling or creating your and building your test base. So yeah, really try to customize it for your situation, because you don't want the worst thing about a linting tool is that it doesn't help you. It annoys you. When it annoys you, you will turn it off and then you will never use it again. This is the worst thing. So really start simple, and if it's even like 2 or 3 rules that works for the test code, use that and try to explain that to your colleague, because we're all in the same process, right? So yeah, customize it and see where you can apply it.
So cool. You did mention it can be called from the CI, from the command line. So is there a way, if someone is ignoring it, or one of your team's like, forget about the linter, when it is checked in, maybe just you can be alerted and you can see the issues and then go to them and try to educate them, say, hey, by the way, that check-in stunk because of these 5 issues that the linter saw?
Yeah, so so if you put it in CI and say, okay, fill the build if this is not passing the linting rules, then of course you can fill the build. But you can also put like everything a warning and just say, okay, this sprint or these 2 sprints, we're going to just learn to work with it, to see what the feedback is, and then enable some more rules or putting them to error. So you can get stricter along the way. It should be like a natural process. And like I said, it really avoid to have it be an annoying tool, because then you're going to avoid it altogether.
That's a great tip. I mean, just friggin' hard weights, people would drive me nuts. Just having that one rule there would save like 70% of the code check-ins in my code reviews for sure.
Yeah, and when you're writing the test and you want to use a hard weight, that's fine, right? You can disable the linting rule just for that line of code, just for you to build a test. But on long term, this is obviously not the best solution to have a reliable test.
So Jamie just wanted to thank you for your answer. She says, yeah, it does not check absolute URLs or weights, but more syntax issues. I see now. Thank you. So thank you for that answer, Kwo. Next question is from Sachin. He wants to know, is there a way to ignore existing rules?
Ignore existing rules?
Yeah, I believe, you could just go into your config file, right? To say ignore this rule if you wanted to.
Yep. You can disable each rule. And you can also do it for all the generic ESLint recommended rules, or if you're using stuff like I see it a lot using the Airbnb codes, the ESLint plugin. You really customize each specific rule as you like.
So, Kwo, is there anything that a linting tool can't catch that you would wish it did, that people do incorrectly all the time, or like a bad practice?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, the linting is limited because you're not running the code, right? So yeah, in that sense, it's really limited. So you really need to think about, okay, if I write this code, what linting rule could be applicable, right? Could work to help to improve your test. So that was like the hardest part. But yeah, all the things that where you need to execute the code to see, and that part, this is obviously missing out. But with ESLint, a lot of things are very powerful that you can check.
Nice, and just a quick reminder to get your questions in. All you need to do is, let me bring up this graphic again, is click on the questions tab. We only have a few minutes left, so get your questions in for Kwo, and I'll get your questions asked on air live with Kwo. So make sure to get your questions in now, because we only have a few minutes left. All right, Kwo, any other best practices? I know you said a good way to introduce this is just keep it simple and then increase it over sprints of the type of how more strict you get over time, I guess. And anything else you think you've seen teams implement this, and what the end result was?
Yeah, and so the default log level, right? So if it's a warning or an error, in your organization or team, it might be different to have it on a different level. So really try to play around with that and see if that works for you. If it's completely new, if linting is completely new, don't activate everything, like all these code conventions and also this plugin. And really try to see, okay, what works for you, because it's, like I said, super customizable.
So I think someone asking this question missed the intro, but they want to know, how hard is it to actually get integrated into your IDE? I think they missed that thing when you showed it with the VS Code. Is it just a matter of importing the plugin and enabling it? So apart from what I did in the project, so npm install this plugin and also installing ESLint and configuring it, for VS Code, install the ESLint plugin, or the how they call it, extension. So in VS Code, I'm looking at my VS Code right now. So there's a option extensions. So if you search extensions and you say ESLint, there's only one, install that one. Then it will automatically pick up your ESLint config file in your project and apply it right away. Right, so all the tools you've worked with this linter with, Kwo, this is a weird question. Is any that seem really needs a linter, like it really kind of makes it so you can write really crazy things that you're probably going to need a linter for? All the tools pretty much the same. Bad practices can go on among all of them pretty much equally.
You mean? Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Yes, I'm just thinking if someone's using TestCafe, are they more prone to write worse code than, say, if someone used WebdriverIO? Do you have those type of statistics?
Oh, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at Puppeteer and Playwright, those are automation libraries, right? They're not really, testing frameworks or anything like that. Not like Cypress, it presents itself as a end-to-end UI because it testing tool because it has so much stuff in it. So if you look at Puppeteer and Playwright, it's really about automation, automation scripting. But also a lot of people use these libraries to work with, for example, with Mocha and Chai or with Jest. Like Jest Puppeteer is a very popular open source repo you can use to write your test, to structure your test, and to use it as a testing framework. And this is what this plugin is all meant for. So it's really about when you're really writing UI tests with any of these automation tools, it can help out. But I wouldn't say that if you use one tool, it's your tests are less reliable or anything like that. I do see a lot of debates about Webdriver and Cypress, because Cypress has all these smart waiters. Of course, in that sense, it still has its pros and cons, right?
Absolutely. Are there any conflicts people need to be aware of when they use this plugin? Is there any known issues where if you use this plugin with something else, it's going to cause issues?
So try to configure the correct automation tool. So don't configure like Cypress when you're using WebdriverIO or the other way around. That will cause some conflicts. And this is still in development. Like this week and last week, I got some issues reported on some rules that are not that sophisticated yet. So I fixed them. So it's still in development. So if you see anything that doesn't work as you expect, let me know. Or I'm super welcoming pull requests, of course. Let's make it in a very helpful plugin for us all.
And Kwo, talking about that, some features, Sachin wants to know: is there any statistics that can be viewed, like how good the team is following the rules?
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
It's not covered with this plugin, or I don't think any ESLint plugin. If you compare it to Sonar Cube, for example, it has a completely integrated dashboard where you have all these code ratings and you can follow the trends. This is not as far as I know, that ESLint can do. So it's more about rapid feedback and integrating it in your CI workflow. About the trends, I'm not sure. Maybe we can, I don't know, capture all the logs or stuff like that. But I've not looked into it yet. But that's
that'd be really
good
cool
one to look into.
So Sachin, get to it. It's on you.
Okay. Let me know if you have any suggestions.
Cool. So Kwo, any other, is anything on your backlog that's coming soon, or that you think is going to be next up, and that you think is a feature that needs to be added shortly?
I wanted to check more scenarios if the rules are really robust in that sense, to really get the current rule set a bit more robust. I might look into things that you don't want in your page objects, for example. but then you have it's a bit more complex because then you have to configure which files are your page objects files, right? Instead of just scanning everything. So I wanted to look into that and how easy and flexible that could be, because I can imagine there are some specific rules you can create just for page objects or any other kind of model or structure you want to follow.
Nice. So cool. Those are the questions we have. So we're running out of time as well. So any parting words of wisdom you want to leave the guilds before we go? Use linting, but use it wisely, right?
Start small, and then get stricter along the way.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Kwo, and thank you for this contribution. I know it takes a lot of effort to do an open source project. You've done a bunch of them, so thank you for all you do for the community. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
All right, talk soon. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Yes, cheers.
All right, so that was Kwo Ding. This is recorded, so if you missed any of it, I'll send you a link in about a few days after I edit out the intro, and we'll get right into it. But before we go, I just want to give a reminder that if you're watching this in the Test Guild, within what I'm calling the Test Guild Hall, that this edition is sponsored by Testum. So there's a link below that's called Register Now. Click on that button, and if you do, make sure that'll give you access to their free community plan, which includes 1,000 runs per month free. And so those runs last forever, but the offer doesn't. So make sure to take advantage of it. Also, when you click that link, Testum knows that we have an active community, and this is something that they should continue to sponsor. So everyone wins when you click on that link below. So do me a favor, click it below, and let me know how it works for you. So Testum's really, really receptive to hear feedback. So if for some reason you're unhappy with it, or you want some feature, or you love it, let us know. Give some feedback back to Testum for that awesome freebie. So just check that below. If you're on YouTube, there's a link in the comments, and after this is done, I'll put a link on the top of the comments as well, so you can check out that free community plan. So that's it for this edition of the Test Guild Meetup. I want to thank everyone for joining. You've been awesome. And let's go back to the comments here. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hey, Penny. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Arun. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you, Dwayne and Samantha as well. Really big shout out. That's what makes these type of events really fun for me, is people asking questions and contributing in the chat. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And see you next week. Next week, we're going to have a session on a real-world example of how someone implemented testing for their microservices platform. So it's going to be a really cool hands-on type thing that you don't want to miss. It's going to be by Sai Anamaraja. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be on testing microservices in the real world. So once again, thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you here next time. Next week it's going to be 10 a.m. To meet the different time zone that Sanjay's at. So you don't want to miss that, to see Saya there. So make sure I'll send a link out to register for that as well. So thank you, everyone. Catch you next time. Cheers.